So first of all, before we get into the panel discussion, I just want to congratulate the Center for Impact and the Energy and Cleantech Association. So Teresa, Kelly, Maggie, and the ECA team, what a great job you guys have done organizing the attendance, whole thing. So very well done. Thank you. So it is my pleasure to have a conversation with Eric and Tom today. Eric is an assistant vice president and the division manager for American Honda Motor, where he is responsible for long-term strategy development and sustainability for Honda's North America operations. Eric began his career at Honda in 1995 as an engineer at Honda Engineering, and over the course of 29 years, he has taken on planning and strategy roles, focusing on the synergy between manufacturing, design, and purchasing. Eric also serves on the board of directors of the Ohio Fuel Cell Coalition, as well as the Torrance Area Chamber of Commerce, leading as vice chair of economic development. Eric earned a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering at the Ohio State, as well as an MBA from the Fisher College of Business at the Ohio University. Thanks for being here. And Tom is an experienced development and finance leader. He is currently the Senior Director of Business Development, where he leads the fleet sales and business development organization for Rivian. In his previous role as the Senior Director of Strategic Finance, he was responsible for the company's long-range financial and business plan. And Tom is one of the first 25 employees of Rivian, and he has seen the company grow from 25 to more than 14,000 employees today. And he's a graduate of Michigan Ross School of Business with an MBA, and he also holds a master's and bachelor's in accounting from Michigan State University, and is also a certified public accountant. So wonderful. So your backgrounds are kind of this intersection between engineering, finance, accounting, and strategy. Is that a fair characterization?
For me, yes. Other than the engineering.
Yeah, as I was sitting listening to you, I was thinking that some of the work that we do probably requires kind of like a multidisciplinary background. So yeah, I think it's a fair characterization. And I want to say thank you so much. It's a real pleasure to be here with you today.
Awesome. So tell us now about Honda and Rivian. Tell us about the mission of the organization, kind of getting out there in the future. Tell us about today and what's going on there. Eric, we'll start with you.
Fantastic. Thank you. So we are really excited in Honda. We are in what we're calling our second founding. I'm hoping many of you are familiar with Honda. We've been a company for over 75 years. Maybe even some of you have driven some of our products. All of those have been internal combustion engines. So our new president has recognized it is time for us to be thinking very differently about where we're heading as a company. And he's calling this moment in time our second founding. And kind of fundamental to that change in the way that we're doing business is thinking about electrification as a key component as we drive toward two key challenges he's given us. We have the 000 challenge, where we're going to be looking for complete carbon neutrality, using clean energy, and having resource circularity all come together from a corporate perspective by 2050. And the second is zero fatalities in any of the products that we put out. So this change to electrification is really the underpinning that allows us to hit those long-term challenges, the triple challenge to zero, and our traffic fatality challenge. So really like new days for us, but very exciting.
I'd like to say thank you as well for the opportunity to speak. This has been great so far. Very insightful speakers that came before us. In terms of Rivian's mission, our stated mission is really twofold. The first is to keep the world adventurous forever. We make outdoor adventure-focused consumer products. And then secondly, it's to decarbonize the atmosphere. So Rivian was founded by our CEO and founder, RJ Scaringe, who went to MIT for his PhD and used to ride around on his bicycle and wonder why the world was the way it was, and decided to found Rivian in his garage, and over the course of a decade was able to get it funded and produce battery electric vehicles. So sustainability is at the core of everything we do at Rivian. We are a mission-driven company in that regard.
Excellent. Say a bit more about the market trends, the shift in consumer demand towards electric vehicles, as you mentioned, and the use cases. What does success look like? And dive one level deeper on this one.
I would agree with the previous speaker that there's a narrative out there right now that EV adoption is slowing down. That is not accurate. EV registrations continue to grow 50% year over year here domestically. I think what we've seen is a very large increase in supply of products available. And I think Tesla, using their market leadership position, has really started to cut prices to maintain market share, which has made it very difficult really for, I'll say, some of the traditional OEMs to enter the space just because of the kind of differences in technology between a Tesla vehicle and some of the first generation EV products coming from the traditional players. So I think adoption continues to occur. You could say we're kind of coming over the first wave and getting ready to enter the second wave. And that second wave is going to require a few more things. It's going to require increase in infrastructure. It's going to require increases in battery technologies to make them longer range, charge faster, lighter weight. And then lastly, and probably the toughest one is just the consumer education and change to try to change that behavior.
Excellent. Eric, what does success look like at Honda?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I have to agree with what Tom is describing. We're not seeing a slowdown in market acceptance. We're seeing a slight uptick, but that trend has been ticking up now for a handful of years. And you're seeing different kind of attacks on what that means to the auto industry. Traditional OEMs maybe have a different pace that they've thought about electrification. New entrants starting in that space only. And of course, those two different types of companies have different challenges in that space. But across the board right now, I think you're seeing that automotive OEMs are placing those bets that is what the market is moving toward. Maybe it's all about how quickly it gets there. I think what Tom was describing about infrastructure, really important point inside this. This won't be just OEMs individually or even collectively capable of moving the market completely itself. It's going to have to be a collaboration. To your question, thinking about what does it look like in a successful kind of future scenario, there's a lot in play there. I think infrastructure has to be designed in a way that consumers are able to get over some of the fears they have with charging right now. I don't know that we're near that spot yet, but I think that's going to be an important element. I think education, consumers also really interesting. What we believe is that once you get someone in an electric vehicle, things actually really start to change. The experience, kind of the fear about what the vehicle is like, starts to really go down. So there will be some kind of tipping point where we see consumers get more comfortable as infrastructure is coming up and the experiences become kind of more popular. We'll be able to see that successful kind of world where we're transitioning entirely toward BEV.
Excellent. So how fair would it be to say that a lot of capabilities that we see in the future of mobility today, companies like Rivian, Honda, Ford, GM, Tesla, stuff like innovation and technology, scale-oriented effects, ability to drive up automation in mobility, and what we would call a big bang disruption, better performance at lower cost. Cheap cars are getting good and good cars are getting cheap. Are those analogous in what you're seeing in future of mobility today?
So yes, I think what you're seeing is a trend with battery technology that's similar to trends with technologies that have come before. With the cost curve, battery technologies are getting cheaper, and battery technology is getting better at the same time. So today on the consumer side, you can build a kind of total cost of ownership curve with the average consumer driving 12 to 15,000 miles per year, and it might be year 5 where you hit that inflection point where owning an EV over the life has been cheaper. But give it another 5 years, give it another 10 years, you'll be reaching that inflection point much sooner, just due to that lower cost of the energy, the lower cost of fuel, and the lower cost of maintenance for the EV.
Excellent. So Eric, go through in more detail, because it's always an interesting exercise in mobility, people always say self-driving cars and flying cars and AI is the future, blah, blah, blah. But the issue is always interesting. As you mentioned, generally sustainable innovation happens. The variable issue is how quickly it happens. So your ability to say it's a couple of years from now versus 20 years from now, it's important. So if we look at the enablers, what are the things that kind of live up to say these things are going to be now? What would they be?
Yeah, so thank you. I'm glad you asked the question in that way. As we were sitting and listening to Tom, I agree again with the things that he's describing about the innovation in the vehicle itself. And I think batteries are moving toward a semi-solid to a solid state technology, which is going to drive costs down, which then hopefully is passed on to the customer, and we see an uptick. But there are more moving parts than that even, and this is not going to be completely news to anybody, but when you think about what's happening to the mobility value offering, you're seeing that it's changing dramatically. It's not just propulsion anymore. We think about the acronym CASE: connected, autonomous, shared, and electrified. So thinking about the electrified part of it and the propulsion part, certainly battery technology and some innovation there is going to help. But how the car is connected to the other parts of infrastructure, or how it's connected in a way that maybe services the customer in ways that cars in the past wouldn't be able to. Maybe the autonomous part is moving a little bit more slowly than the other parts of the acronym, but still slow, steady progress is being made there. And then shared, and how that becomes part of the value proposition to the customer. All of those things are changing at the same time. So when we're thinking about kind of, what it is that's going to look successful, again, we're thinking about each of those spots in the vehicles that we'll end up offering.
Excellent. So, Tom, what about the future of mobility? It reminds me of autonomous vehicles, like Waymo. If you look at the performance rate, even with accidents in autonomous driving, Cruise, Waymo, etc., it is still beating human driving in terms of reducing accidents. You look at cars, there's about 40,000 deaths in US today per year. At what point do society, legislators, and others say, I understand the need of individual driving the car here, but we have a system that is pricing people out of the market. On average, we are not getting good outcomes, and at some point, we need to press the limit here on what we are going to get done. Do you see that happening, or this is not in our lifetime?
I think certainly in our lifetime, it's hard to predict exactly how quickly government's going to act in any regard. But just to go to that future mobility state, I mean, the systemic changes happen when we moved from kind of the personal ownership of assets to the shared or subscription-based utilization of assets, and that only occurs when we have full L4 autonomous driving out on the road. I think back to when I started at Rivian in 2015. We thought by 2020 there'd be vehicles with no steering wheels, and that last kind of 5% of solving the autonomy problem has just taken 95% of the time. But if you dream and think about what the future looks like, where no one needs to own their own asset, utilization of these vehicles goes up because there only needs to be enough vehicles on the road for peak use case. The cars I'm looking at in the garage here that get utilized 3% per day, go from that to everything's being utilized 85% per day. And you just reduce such an impact from cities. Hopefully by then everything's electric, but carbon reduction as well. So I do think that's coming. I think it's the next 10 to 15 years, maybe not by 2020 like everyone expected a decade ago.
Interesting. And Eric, let me ask you, you alluded a couple of minutes ago what it takes to win. I see that in mobility, it takes a lot of capital. And looking at the future, you need to have a risk appetite. The way technology is evolving, is it fair to make a conclusion that there's going to be a disproportionate mobility market shared by large companies such as Honda, Rivian, Tesla, etc. in the future?
I'm not sure that that's going to be the case, honestly. And the way that we've been thinking about mobility, electrified mobility when we go forward, is you'll see that we haven't abandoned hydrogen as a really interesting energy source. So we continue to look at fuel cell technology. And over the course of our history, we've had some fuel cell vehicles. as we continue to refine that fuel cell technology, it could be the case that we finally believe that mobility or smaller mobility products aren't the perfect landing spot for that. But what I think that speaks to is I'm not sure the full solution is completely we have a clear line of sight on that yet. So if that's kind of not clear, then saying it's going to be one company or another doesn't feel like we can make that prediction either. And honestly, as an OEM that's been working in the mobility space for decades, seeing so many new entrants that are coming in to not only the propulsion part of what mobility means, but the services part and the autonomy part, I'm not even sure we know all of the players that we're going to be competing with in 5 to 10 years.
Interesting. So let me ask you another macro question here, because some speakers earlier today mentioned about the supply chain and the manufacturing by China. So I can't resist this. Will China be a catalyst for us? Large domestic market, a population willing to bet big on the future of mobility and try services out. Will they eclipse US, and that will be a catalyst for more activity here? Tom?
I think it's hard to say. The beauty of China is extremely proficient manufacturing base, cheap. I'm not sure it'll be a catalyst. It's almost a competitor. I know Rivian studied whether or not to be in that market. That the political climate right now is tough between the two nations. But I think from an EV perspective, there are dozens of Chinese EV OEMs. Some of them are making pretty compelling products. And there was just an article in the Wall Street Journal yesterday about how they're purchasing plants in Mexico to try to enter the U.S. market. So I actually think from an OEM perspective, there's not really any Chinese produced products in the U.S. today, but that's coming very soon. So I see it as a competitive threat within the U.S. market, but also offering benefits from kind of supply chain, battery technology perspective.
Interesting. Eric, what's your take on that?
Yeah, so a really interesting question, thinking about it in two different ways. I think from a marketplace competitiveness perspective, we know today they are not in this marketplace. So there is potential that could change over the course of time. I don't know that the sentiment right now leans toward that. And then when you think about the other aspect that's really important, the technical perspective, and when we step back and think about the specifications about the vehicles, we operate in both marketplaces. Honda has a very large footprint in China. We also have a very large footprint here in North America. And those technical specifications are quite different now. The technologies, the chemistries, the batteries themselves, different. And the way the vehicles are built, similar, but the specifications of the vehicles themselves, different. So as a catalyst for innovation in North America, I think maybe TBD. I'm not sure how that will impact how we're thinking about product that might come here.
Interesting. And both of you mentioned batteries. So looking at the future of mobility, are companies willing to bet big on batteries? There's many new technologies coming up in competition with lithium ion. There's sodium ion batteries. There's a lot of investment going in hydrogen economy. What's your take on that?
I'll go first. So we've placed bets in both. We've made a large investment in Ohio, which has been for decades our manufacturing headquarters. We have what we're calling our EV hub. We've invested in a battery facility there that will provide batteries to our manufacturing lines in Ohio, and that will be the center point of our electrified future in North America manufacturing. But at the same time, I was mentioning before, we've continued to invest in fuel cell technology. We've been very interested in the hydrogen economy and hydrogen infrastructure. This has been a decades-long push inside Honda. We've had fuel cell vehicles even in the 1990s. So we haven't abandoned that. We think there are certain applications that hydrogen is a very great fuel source. It could be that it's not maybe personal mobility, but still yet to be determined.
So at Rivian today, we're invested in two different battery technologies, and we're constantly studying kind of future state technologies to put into our products. this is my view, but I think 20 years from now, 25 years from now, battery technology is going to start to commoditize in many ways. And that's not going to be a driver of success for different OEMs. It's really going to be more about technology and branding and customer experience. But we are exploring a host of different battery technologies, considering whether we want to produce those cells ourselves or rely on supply chain partners. And then how far up do we want to vertically integrate into that battery supply chain? Do we want to go directly to the mines and reserve capacity there? Or do we just want to partner with a cell provider and give them the recipe to the cell that we'd like them to make for us?
Awesome. So you mentioned the battery technology in the long term is going to be commoditized. So now let's get to the more specific stuff. And this will bring you back to your business school days. So we are in a business school classroom right now. So you've got to prioritize what areas of innovation you want to focus on. If you look at across all the different areas, we heard some through the beginning of the day, that were kind of consumer demand, collaboration, partnerships, policy, regulation, supply chain, and this and that. I'm sure there's got to be some sort of value chain that says, let's say regulation is probably one of the most value-add areas in the future of mobility. How do you look at what areas you focus on? We'll start with Tom first.
So I think when people think of Rivian and Tesla, they think of electric vehicle companies. But really what I think the differentiator is, in addition to the propulsion system, is we build smart, connected battery electric vehicles. And the smart and connected is actually more of a differentiator in many ways. So Rivian owns our software stack from the ground up. The only other OEM that can truly lay claim to that would be Tesla. Most of the electrical, the ECUs in the vehicle have been designed and engineered by Rivian. We push out over-the-air updates. So when I bought my R1T pickup truck, it had 290 miles of range. Over the course of the last 16 months through our battery engineers optimizing algorithms, both when the vehicle's in use and when the vehicle's not in use, the vehicle now has 320 miles of range. So it's increased by 10% since I've purchased it. So it's a living, breathing organism that gets better. That user interface gets better. So I really think like that is what will set. That is an area where Rivian is going to invest heavily in the future. So in addition to battery technologies, in addition to autonomy, I really think it's that software and user experience that is going to be a differentiator between companies.
So as I think about the question and thinking about answering it through our lens, it's tough to not look at each of the items that you were describing. They all need attention. So I don't know that any one of these are the priority inside what we're doing, but I'll share a little bit about something that's been a change in Honda over our history. So collaboration and partnerships is absolutely new in this space. So this has been a bit different for us, and we have had to prioritize how we're thinking about that. We're working with a battery manufacturer, LG, for the facility I was just describing to you that's being built in Ohio. But we're also stepping out of just the kind of the product side itself, and we're thinking about infrastructure side. So we've been partnering with other OEMs and a company called Iona, where we're thinking about how to collaborate on putting charging infrastructure in place so customers can get over that fear of being stranded somewhere. That's an interesting new priority for us. We've not done something like that in the past. We're also working with another group in a partnership called ChargeScape, and the idea is to work with utilities across North America to make the charging experience simpler and more seamless for the consumer at the end of the day. So those kind of partnerships didn't really exist for us, but maybe they didn't need to in an old refueling past. When we think about the value chain, and specifically the supply chain, we're starting to look both up and downstream. I was telling you before, one of our challenges is about resource circularity. So we're moving very far upstream into the raw materials space to start thinking about how to work in that part of the value chain to ensure the securement of the precious minerals that we need for the batteries that will be in our product. But on the back end, we've also announced we're working with recyclers. So, of course, it makes sense when the batteries are finished with their useful life, we would be able to work with the recycling company to bring back those same precious metals and hopefully mitigate some of the front end work. Those kind of partnerships are wholly new to us and have become a priority. And if you're following, you've probably seen a lot of announcements. It's tough to keep up with the amount of announcements we've been making, actually.
Interesting. So fast forward 10 to 15 years from now, give us what the future of sustainable mobility should look like and is likely to look like given the current market trends. How will mobility actually look differently? Who will be the key players? And how will our lives as users change and all of that? We'll start with Tom first.
I think this goes back to the vision I might have been painting a few minutes back of autonomous vehicles, going back to case, but kind of shared ownership models or subscription-based services. But it won't just be these white people movers with little pods. Like people still want to emotionally interact with the vehicle. So the ones that win consumers' hearts will win. There will be different vehicles for different use cases. You'll still need utilitarian functions. So there will be pickup trucks. If you're going to the airport, you'll still want something where you can fit 4 large suitcases into it. And then maybe if you're going intracity, you do have kind of a taxi pod, so to speak, that can bring down kind of cost per mile of your transportation down to pennies. I do believe it'll be primarily electric vehicles in 10 to 15 years. And I think who's going to be the winners remains to be seen. In terms of the types of companies, it'll also be interesting to see large operators of fleets, how their businesses evolve. So someone like an Enterprise or a Hertz, where is there still a line between the OEM and Hertz in an Enterprise or in a world in which OEMs are making vehicles, how do those partnerships, in which an OEM is making vehicles and they're autonomous and kind of software controlled, like how do those partnerships look with the kind of normal players of those large fleets today?
The time horizon here is really important. And if you're saying 10 to 15 years, what Honda's been talking about is producing electric vehicles 100% by 2040. So that gets us close to that 15-year pitch. But if you unwind back from that, we're talking about the 2030s, what I think it is going to look like through our lens. We continue to produce many, many hybrid vehicles. We see that as still an essential stepping stone toward an electrified future. Our goal is, again, I was describing 000 by 2050. We make all electric vehicles by 2040. So already there you can project there's an amount of time where we will need all of our vehicles in service to kind of be off the road. Our Scope 3 emissions are our biggest set of emissions. So the way I'm seeing it is it's still going to be kind of mixed in the 2030s, where we still have some internal combustion engines, hopefully lots and lots of hybrids, and a new onslaught of BEVs, making up some kind of marketplace. I hope BEVs specifically can start to be more democratized, and we start to see the economies of scale we're hoping for, the technology breakthroughs, and we see the BEV vehicles moving kind of down market. I think that's kind of what the reality is going to look like.
Interesting. So let me ask you my last question before I do my so what's. So we have many students in this classroom today, many entrepreneurs in the clean energy, in the mobility space. What's one piece of advice that you would like to give the students of Anderson today?
I'll jump in. We said this at the very beginning. You were saying that the disciplines that we brought to this conversation were kind of broad-ranging. I think that's still really important. I think the students in this space can't be pigeonholed into one spot. There's so much about this work that I find is connecting different parts of a value chain inside the space itself that is important. So being able to communicate across boundaries and disciplines, I think, is really important. So staying curious about all of the things that are changing, it's so dynamic, I think sets a student up really well to enter in this space in kind of any spot and then really thrive.
And I guess I'll give more general advice. Just given my previous experience, it would be don't shy away from taking on a big risk and trying to. I wasn't the founder of the company, but trying to think big and make a huge impact. It is possible. It's not easy, but the journey I've been on over the last 10 years with Rivian, I wouldn't trade it for anything. So don't be afraid to go outside of the box a little bit.
Interesting. So the reward would be high. So I got 3 key takeaways from today's discussion, and the opportunity for you is to upgrade my takeaways. The first one is that there are a fair number of items that are analogous in the future of sustainable mobility to what we are talking about today. The role of supply chain, the role of infrastructure, the power of customization and personalization, and the opportunity to improve performance while the cost goes down. That many of the principles we see in general tech apply here. The second point is that there are a variety of enablers that allow this to happen. Certainly quantity, but as you mentioned, more towards quality. That's really the frontier here in mobility. And the third point is that, at some point, there's going to be a notable discontinuity in what areas of innovation. And that discontinuity is going to be driven at a societal level about the attitudes of the benefit of larger society against individuals. Things like self-driving, flying cars, which may have been holding things up. The future users of mobility will have different attitudes, and you'll have maturity of well-capitalized, risk-oriented companies that are betting big on sustainability. And at some point, we are going to see whole different models.
Yes.
What strikes me about that is how complicated it is. And sitting here as 2 OEMs, I'm sure we would both agree it will not just be OEMs that pull this off. It will have to be OEMs, academia, government, and working really closely to understand what consumers will accept.
I think one consistent thread throughout the day, and this is an unfortunate reality maybe, is just capital. All of this stuff takes a lot of money. So government's going to need to play a role. Private industry is going to need to play a role. A couple of years ago when interest rates were 0%, a lot of this stuff was easy to get kicked off. Today, in a higher interest rate environment, where every, as a public company that is not making money today, every initiative needs to have a business case that boxes, and it's going to require capital across the entire sphere.
Interesting. So Eric and Tom, let me just say thank you so much for all the insight, all the way from sustainability to future of mobility. Congratulations on your career and your colleagues, what the amazing work they're doing at Honda and Rivian. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. It's a pleasure. Thank you.